What in the world was that? Here we were after bowl selection Sunday, tooting our horn, saying Indiana football was great, and then New Year's Day happened, and Ohio State punched Clemson in the teeth, and Northwestern won their bowl game, and then everything just ended with the thud, a whimper. Indiana lost to Ole Miss 26-20 in the Outback Bowl. The bowl drought extends to at least 30 years. Indiana's still looking for their first bowl win since 1991, and we're going to get into that game, get into IU basketball, who had a 2-0 week. That's what's to come for all of you here on episode 176 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for IU sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on January 5th, 2021. We're ringing in the new year with Indiana HQ associate and contributor Jevan McCoskey. Jevan, you watched that game on Saturday afternoon, and like all of us, I'm sure you were just like, what in the world? What the heck happened to IU that night?
No, I didn't just watch it. In person. I was there in the stands. I will say it was so cool to be at a game where like there's fans. That was something that really stuck out. And maybe there just shouldn't be fans at IU games ever again, because it seems like we didn't come out and play how we were supposed to. It was sad. It was. I mean, you have a season like we did, and we get so disappointed when we're placed here in this AP poll and this coaches poll and in the college football playoffs, and then we go out and just lay an egg like we did against Ole Miss and Outback Bowl, and it was tough to watch.
I see what you did there. Lay an egg, right? Ole Miss plays in the Egg Bowl every year. That's a sly little move on your part. Yeah, and I don't know why I said night. Obviously, Indiana played on Saturday afternoon. Yeah, you were at the Outback Bowl. You were at both Indiana basketball games this week, so you have some pretty exclusive access through Indiana HQ to watching these Hoosiers play in such strange times. But yeah, IU lost 26-20. Matt Corral was the Outback Bowl MVP. He gave IU lots of problems on Saturday afternoon. Threw for 342. He also ran for 37, 2 touchdowns. Indiana just never seemed to get their footing in the game. It didn't help that their starting quarterback got injured. And of course, the starting quarterback came into the season as the backup quarterback. And so obviously Indiana was shorthanded as it was. Stevie Scott tried getting IU back into the game. The defense just couldn't get those takeaways that we've grown so accustomed to seeing them getting this season. Jevan, as you look at this game, right? As you look at this game, obviously disappointing for IU to lose. Which side of the ball are you looking to as far as why Indiana couldn't get over the hump in the Outback Bowl? Is it the offense that needs to be criticized more? The defense? Is it kind of both equally? How do you look at that?
Well, not that anybody gets a pass, because you have to come and you have to perform. But when, like you mentioned earlier, when Penix goes down, the ability of the offense shrinks. Less plays can be called. You have to minimize your what you think is going to happen with IU's offense. So while you can't put this all on the offense, because they only put 3 points up on the board in the first half. But we just expected so much more from a defense that's been labeled elite all year. They've had the most takeaways in the country, especially going against Ole Miss quarterback who's thrown the most interceptions in the country. You just thought that there was going to be more big plays from Indiana's defense, and there wasn't. And it, like I said, being there at the beginning of the game, the energy was so high when the defense was on the field, and towards the third and fourth quarter when we needed those big stops, it just kind of felt like it wasn't there. And like you mentioned, Stevie Scott did get rolling a little bit. He ended up just being 1 yard short of 100 yards out of 2 touchdowns. So I would say I put this game more on the defense than I do the offense.
Yeah, and I get that. And look, we sent out a poll at halftime of the Outback Bowl asking the same question. Indiana was trailing. It was a pretty ugly game at that point. IU was down, I think it was 14-6 at halftime, and check that, it was 13-3. I don't know where 14-6 came from. It was 13-3 at halftime. Ole Miss had the lead. And we said, hey, which side of the ball are you looking to? And 85% of our followers and of our responses said the offense. And look, while you do have a backup quarterback in there, at the same time, I was expecting Indiana's playmakers to put more production on the field. And here's the deal, right? Like, we saw Ty Freifogel, and he was named first team all conference receiver, and he was named All America, and he just didn't have his game. He had 3 catches on the afternoon, and we've grown so accustomed to seeing Stevie Scott doing his thing, and he had a strong second half, but that first half running game wasn't there. And look, absolutely, it's not a player's thing. You can question Nick Sheridan's play calling. Why was Indiana so pass happy in a game where it seemed like the running lanes were available?
Not only pass happy. I mean, at the beginning of the game, the first 5 passes went to WAP.
Yeah.
I mean, you get kind of predictable at that point. I mean, and I'm sure we'll mention it on later with WAP, but I mean, sooner or later he's got to learn to cut up field. I mean, he has the body type. It kind of reminds me of like T.Y. Hilton. And I only say that because I'm a real big Colts fan, and like T.Y. is so good at getting upfield and just dropping to avoid contact. And it kind of seems like WAP is trying to avoid the contact, but in the worst way. He just runs backwards. And
we don't have to wait until later. We can mention it now. It was very frustrating to watch Fillier do that consistently. And of course, he went on to catch 18 passes, which regardless of how it looks is a remarkable accomplishment. It's a school record for a single game, and it was a Big Ten bowl record. It was an Outback Bowl record, all sorts of statistical milestones with an 18 catch afternoon. But yeah, I don't know what he was doing. And, as somebody who does have ambitions to get to the next level, I'm sure Grant Hurd, the wide receivers coach, is going to have a word or two to say to WAP after that game. And he's one of many seniors who have to decide still whether or not they're going to return to Bloomington for another season. They're eligible to because of COVID-19 and the strange circumstances surrounding this season. WAP is one of the seniors who has yet to decide. No one has said they're leaving the team, except there's some rumors that punter Hayden Whitehead is probably done with his collegiate career, but guys like Mackenzie Nora are coming back. Guys like I think I also saw Marcelino McCrary Ball, formerly known as Marcelino Ball.
Yes.
He's coming back after his injury struck season last year. So really interesting to see there. But overall, I'm still looking at the offense. This is an Ole Miss defense that leaked huge yardage and huge points to even, abject poor offenses in that conference, teams like South Carolina and Mississippi State, and even LSU, who had a shaky season last year, put up huge numbers. And Indiana's offense just didn't. And let's make one thing clear. This IU football team very much cared about this game, right? We're not going to go all Dan Mullen on you. We're not going to go all SEC on you and say that Indiana didn't care. Indiana cared. Indiana tried to win. And they just got beat. They just got beat by an Ole Miss team that was rapid-fire tempo on offense, executing well on defense, a little bit opportunistic with a couple of takeaways, and it didn't hurt that Indiana's quarterback separated his shoulder in the second quarter.
Yeah.
So with all that said, look, good teams lose. We saw Iowa State lose to Louisiana at the start of the season. I believe Oklahoma lost to Kansas State earlier this year. It happens to everyone. Florida lost to LSU. Good teams lose football games, and this in no way tarnishes Indiana season, right, Jevan? I mean, this in no way is all of a sudden now 6 months of, I can't believe IU did this. It was still a historic season that's going to be remembered positively in the years to come, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't mitigate, beating Penn State for the first time in 3 decades or beating Michigan and Michigan State and Penn State for the first time in however long it's been. It doesn't mitigate all that, but it does put a really big disappointing cap on the end of the season. But in no way does it mitigate it, no. But disappointing finish, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I liked what our Hoosier Sound co-founder Noah said as we were preparing for this podcast. He said, "For my sake, please give some of the loss on Saturday to the defense. The offense is a big part of it, but the defensive standards have changed. Ole Miss's offense is good, but IU let them drive and get yards too many occasions. And like we said, the defense just wasn't able to get those interceptions, those turnovers that are so important. And Tom Allen said as much after the game. We didn't see too many adjustments, and when it was all said and done, the Hoosiers lost by 6. So let's move on to the future. Right? I mean, Jevan, what's next for this program? There's an opening in the defensive coordinator spot. We'll get to that in a moment. Setting that aside, what do you expect this offseason to be about for IU? Because on paper, they should be able to reload for a really big 2021 football season.
Yeah, I mean, in no way do I think that they're going to take a step back. I think that moving forward for the next few years, it should all be steps forward. And like, how are we?
Hey guys, how's it going? I finally made the podcast.
Matt Lucan's in the house, and it seemed like our friend Matt here had some technical difficulties earlier tonight, but he's ready to roll. Jevan, keep going on IU's future, and then Matt, I'll toss it over to you. We're just trying to look forward here the next few months and the next few years. What's this football program got to look forward to coming up?
Yeah, I mean, they have so much to look forward to, but I'll let Jevan finish his thoughts first, and then he can.
So the only thing I was going to finish with is like the expectation for IU is no longer like, oh, maybe we'll have a winning season, or maybe we'll beat these teams. It's bowl game. Like the expectation is we'll make a bowl game and we should win these bowl games for the first time in 30 years. Hopefully, we'll get that opportunity again next year to bring that illustrious bowl game back, that championship bowl game back. But that's the expectation for me for next year.
Matt, what are you looking forward to?
I think we're beyond the expectation that we should win bowl games. I think the expectation this year was we were supposed to win this bowl game. Yeah. We were against a subpar, sub 500 SEC team, and we came out and laid an egg, right? And we laid an egg last year in the Gator Bowl against what ended up being a subpar run Tennessee team. So now we're sitting here like, well, what are the expectations for next year, right? This is the question. This is the big question. And honestly, the expectations for next year is we should be within one score of being in the college football playoff again, because that's what we were this year, right? If you look down our schedule, we lost by 7 points in Columbus to Ohio State. If we win that game, we probably beat Northwestern, right? There's a good chance we might beat Northwestern. And all of a sudden, we're looking at, does the committee put an 8-0 Indiana team in the college football playoff, which would be incredible to talk about? But we were really within a couple yards, a drop catch, a pick six away from being in that conversation this year. And if you looked on Twitter today at all, you had Tom Allen tweeting about all these players starting to talk about coming back for next year. Marcelino Ball, who we played all year this year without, who's one of the stars of the defense last year, missed the season with a season-ending injury this year. And you were talking about how the defense was supposed to be at blame for the loss. That's right. That's because Bryant Fitzgerald got burned every single play. He was in open space. It was bad. Like, he did not play well, and he's a lot of promise coming up. But getting somebody like Marcelino Ball back is going to be huge for this defense and the secondary. And just he was the leader as well. So a lot of different things coming back next year. You have a seasoned offensive line, and you get Penix back. Maybe. And hopefully he's 100% ready to go. That's a big if. But if not, we have Tuttle, who has experience. We should seriously we are going to be covering a team that is going to be on the verge of breaking through nationally as a football program. And this is not something that we need to take lightly as fans, because there rightfully should be expectations. And that starts with, who are we going to hire for this defensive coordinator position coming up in the offseason?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about now, because, look, there are a lot of interesting ways Indiana can go with this, starting with in-house guys, right? You could look at safeties coach Jason Jones. You could look at corners coach Brandon Shelby, Casey Teagarden's the current special teams coach. And by the way, the special teams part of the game was awesome for Indiana on Saturday. It was the one side of the ball that exceeded expectations going in. Charlie Campbell was great. Hayden Whitehead was awesome punting the football when he had to. But Indiana could also go outside the box. If it's not Jones or Shelby or Teagarden, who's got a defensive background, how about a guy like Chris Ash, who is still under contract at Texas, but he might be let go after Tom Herman's firing? I know there are interesting options like Wes McGriff from Auburn. I know the Football Scoop guy said Indiana, apparently, according to a report, is targeting Chris Kiffin, who's the current Browns defensive line coach, as well as a former Ole Miss guy who's got relationships with Tom Allen going back to the early part of this 2010s decade. Matt, as you look at those options, who stands out to you? Do you want to see the Hoosiers promote from within or go outside the box and try to land a big fish?
I would like to go outside the box and land a big fish. That's just what I said last year when we did our talk about who's going to be replacing Mike DeBord. Who is DeBord? Who's going to come in and help change the program? Maybe give a little bit of more juice to the program, right? We're stepping up. We're taking steps every year. And I think this year you got to look to the NFL, right? You look at a Cleveland Browns team that's one of the better defensive lines. You look at a guy who maybe won't lose to Ole Miss next year if we have his younger brother, Lane Kiffin's younger brother, lining up on our defensive coordinator. Like there's steps to this, and the good programs go and they poach from the highest levels of football, and they give guys opportunities that they might not get in the NFL just yet. And getting the defensive coordinator position at a Big Ten school that's going to be have serious expectations going into next year. That is quite a jump from the defensive line coach of the Cleveland Browns. And the Cleveland Browns are great in their playoff team. They might get blown out by the Steelers because of COVID issues, but we're not going to talk about that. But no, seriously, and he plays with some amazing players, and he coaches some amazing players like Myles Garrett. Say what you will about him, right? He might not be the most popular person on planet Earth, but he's one heck of a football player, and he's a freak. And so having somebody with that experience teaching and coaching our defensive line, and even our offensive line, how to guard guys like that. Now that is just experience that you can't pass on. So I would like to see us go that direction. I also like the defensive coordinator from Auburn. I thought he's had a really good track record of good defenses. That hasn't been the problem at Auburn. It's mostly been the offense, which is confusing because their head coach is their former offensive coordinator. We're not going to get into that at all. But anyways, I really like the Kiffin idea. And I think the idea that's being floated and they have a prior relationship, I really like that.
Yeah, and Kevin Steele is that Auburn defensive coordinator you're referring to. Of course, a guy like Chris Kiffin could give Tom Allen more recruiting sort of prowess in that SEC region of the country. Yeah, more recruiting cred. Jevan, who are you looking at? Do you want to see IU, pick a guy from inside the house, or go out of the box here, go out of the state, go out of the region to land their next defensive coordinator?
Well, I agree with Matt. Kiffin is probably going to bring them. His name is going to probably bring the most attention. But I'm going to stick with in-house. I think that if you can stay in-house, that might be like the best way to go as far as like who you trust within, because you're going to trust him within your organization. And Jason Jones, the safeties coach for IU, he's been a coach for 18 years, including 8 in the SEC and 5 in the Big 12. He's well versed with Allen. That goes back to the days at Ole Miss, whenever he was the co-defensive coordinator there at Ole Miss under Tom Allen, or with Tom Allen. So that while Kiffin is a great choice, he does bring that working with pros, all those aspects. I think that Jason Jones would be also a great second choice about number one.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Indiana could definitely go both ways. I know Brandon Shelby's got a lot of respect within the locker room from his corners, right? You saw how great IU secondary was all season. By the way, I just noticed, Matt, you said Mike DeBoer, when of course he meant Kalen DeBoer when Kalen DeBoer went to Fresno State. We're just going to make sure the listeners don't jump on our case for that. I'm going to say, why not Chris Ash? I mean, look. If he gets let go at Texas, this is a guy with a Big Ten background, having been at Ohio State and Rutgers. He's improved a Texas defense that was really bad a couple years ago. And I'm going to throw one other name way out of left field, Will Muschamp. Remember Will Muschamp, the former South Carolina head coach who had a rough time with the Gamecocks? Well, he's somebody who's from that SEC neck of the woods, somebody that Tom Allen, is familiar with, having coached against him in previous years. I see for the moon. I mean, it's not like Will Muschamp is a good head coach, but as a defensive coordinator and maybe as somebody who looks for a new challenge in the Big Ten, I think Muschamp would be an intriguing option. Again, like I said, out of left field, but I think Indiana would be best to cast a wide net because this program is capable of sort of elevating to another level as you head into 2021. But I'm
not sure about the Will Muschamp idea.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, I grew up a Florida fan. I can tell you, having watched those Florida teams under Will Muschamp, I feel like the defense at Florida got worse every year that he was head coach. And I don't know how that's possible when he's a defensive head coach. So, Maybe not. Maybe not that wide of a net. Maybe let's shrink the net slightly.
Man,
he did say left field. He did say it was out of left field. Maybe over the left field wall into the left field stands. Maybe over there. But.
Yeah. Look, hey, all I'm saying is Muschamp as a head coach, no sir, no way, not approaching that. The defenses he had as a head coach really struggled, but as a DC, I think the responsibility level you have is different. You're going to be working with Tom Allen. You're going to be building off this mantra. I think it's something to think about. Expecting Indiana to do it, not at all. We'll just let people talk about it for a minute. But it's time for Who Won the Week in IU Sports this past week, and there are a lot of Hoosiers who did really well. Thomas Bryant's off to a good start in the NBA with Washington, for example. A number of Hoosiers doing well in the NFL. But I'm going to go with athletic trainer Robert Black. Now, you may not be familiar with the name, but Robert Black is somebody who's been the athletic trainer for the women's basketball program since 2004. And he's been a part of Indiana University as an athletic trainer since 1989. And this past week, Black was selected to the Indiana Athletic Trainers Association Hall of Fame. And that's a really impressive accomplishment for somebody who's put this to their job, put this as a part of their job for the last 30 years or so. Somebody who's been really vital to this Indiana women's basketball program, who's experiencing unprecedented success right now. So it's nice to see someone get the credit for putting so much hard work into what they've done. So Robert Black won the week this past week in IU Sports. Just remember, though, people listening out there, if you would like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at the Hoosier Sound as well as at Indiana HQ. So let's switch gears here, guys. The basketball team went 2-0. Matt, you and I finally nailed it. We said they were going to go 2-0 last week. They went 2-0, unlike the previous week where they said they were going undefeated, and they lost both games to Illinois and Northwestern. This past week, Indiana knocked off Penn State by 2 in double overtime. They beat Maryland by 8 on Monday night. I'm going to start with you, Matt. As you look at both of those games, in general, big picture, what stood out to you? And let's go positive first. What positive things stood out for you as far as this IU basketball team is concerned, which evened up their conference record at 2-2?
Well, I've been watching a lot of documentaries recently on boxing. So our ability to hop off the mat when we're down and or getting punched in the face and not keeping out of our corner, right? I used a couple of references here for boxing. I think that's probably the focus of this week. We did not play their best basketball. Let's be honest. Penn State's shot out of their mind. But that's besides the point. We still shouldn't have let them get into a rhythm like that. And then like that, I don't have to tell you guys how bad that last game against Maryland was, right? So not great games, not fun to watch, but we won. And a win is a win. And we fought through adversity, right? Everybody talks about fighting through adversity, right? Armand Franklin, probably our most improved player and our second best player, goes down with an injury last night. And we're down, and we had a terrible half. And then we got off to a rough half in the second half. And we still found a way to come back and win that game. And that's thanks to Trace Jackson-Davis, who had a great week. And that's thanks to Rob Fennessy, somebody who I've grilled many times, but had a great game last night to close it off. So I think we're finally trying to find footing somewhere, or at least trying to stay afloat in this crazy Big Ten conference.
Yeah, and Fennessy's somebody who's probably going to have to step up here this upcoming week. Archie Miller said Franklin is doubtful to play the next 2 games, so you're almost definitely going to see more Rob Fennessy hit the floor. Big shot, Rob, right? Jevan, you were at Assembly Hall for both games. What did you notice? What are the certain things that maybe our fans may not have seen with Indiana's wins over Penn State and Maryland? What did you see on the bench? How did you see the team's body language throughout the game? Similar question to Matt's, what stood out to you? And if you want to throw out a criticism, feel free, Jevan. Obviously, like Matt said, wasn't perfect. It wasn't a work of art. It wasn't Da Vinci by any means.
Cool. So I'll start out negative. That way we can finish on a positive note. Indiana's transition defense is very subpar. Not that I can remember so much of the Penn State game, but just being at that game last night against Maryland, like the first 5 minutes of the game, Maryland got 3 or 4 wide open threes that maybe not all went in, but I mean, when you give good teams like that, not maybe the best teams obviously, but when you give teams like that aren't the best shooting teams, they're going to knock down wide open shots unless you're Indiana and we can't throw it in the ocean most of the time. But for a positive note, like you asked about the bench, and then also Matt mentioned, being able to get up after being knocked down. I credit a lot of that to the bench. I mean, that's something that teams around the country this year are going to have to get better at. It's creating their own energy, and Indiana does a great job on the bench. I mean, from start to finish, no one is sitting down unless you're Armand Franklin last night and you get injured. Everyone is standing up the entire time, and so that's a big positive for IU. But I mean, Coach Archie Miller said it best. Like this team runs through Trace and Race. As much as we love to throw a bunch of credit to Trace, which is well warranted, Race Thompson last night against Maryland played, as Archie said, one of the best games any Indiana player has had this year. So I think a lot of credit goes to those two as well, and then all of the guards as a whole stepping up last night in the second half after Armand went down.
Yeah, and if you ask me, the one guy who had a great week last week in Indiana going 2-0 was Archie Miller.
Yeah.
And he's somebody I've criticized on this podcast multiple times, but we don't have an agenda here on the Hoosiers Sound. And Archie Miller deserves a ton of credit for how he contributed to Indiana's wins, both against Penn State as well against Maryland. Let's throw this example from the Maryland game because freshest on our mind. We posted an article, as we do every post game after IU plays, that Indiana's best lineups were what, and Indiana's worst lineups were what. And we send it out after every contest. Indiana trailed 30-22 early in the second half. They were down by 8 against the Terps after trailing by 6 at halftime. And Archie Miller, who never substitutes in the first few minutes of each half, pulled Trey Galloway. And he noticed, and there's one thing we mentioned on this podcast, is in the Big Ten, you've got to be able to adapt on the fly. Archie Miller noticed Trey Galloway wasn't having his best night. Galloway finished with 2 points and 2 rebounds on the day, team worst -14 in that win over Maryland. Archie took him out and put Jerome Hunter in. Jerome Hunter made some mistakes. He fouled guys on the arc, and I was the first one to take Jerome out. This isn't working. This was a rough situation. Put someone else in. Try Jordan Geronimo. Try Christian Land. Try whoever. But Archie stuck with Jerome Hunter, and Jerome Hunter rewarded him by banging down 2 threes in a key moment of that game and allowed Indiana to pull away. And then that group of 5 that he had out there with Finney, Durham, and Hunter, along with Thompson and Jackson Davis, dominated Maryland. It was the reason Indiana won that game, and Archie just rode with them for most of that second half. And that's a great example of the type of coaching Archie Miller needs to do to help Indiana win in a really tough league where coaches are capable of adding value to a team with moves like that. So it was good to see. I thought Archie Miller had a great week for Indiana. A week from tonight, I might be sitting here ripping him to shreds. Who knows how it goes? Definitely something to think about. So I want to ask this, all right? You head over to the Ken Palm machine. The old Ken Palm site has Indiana going 10-10 in the Big Ten. After IU's went over Maryland on Monday night, the Hoosiers are projected to go 10-10 in conference play. So, Jevan, let me ask you first. Do you think Indiana is going to do better than that or worse than that, given where this team is at right now?
Given where they're at right now, can I say just like even, like with 10-10, not better or worse? Because while like I said earlier, we run through Trace and Race, I still don't think Indiana's found their true identity because even though that we know Trace is the best player, for some reason we still have a hard time getting him the ball. We still like to shoot threes, even though we start out 0 for 9 in the first half. So I don't know, so I'm just going to go with even. 10-10. That's fine.
10-10. All right, Matt, I hope you don't say 10-10. Come on, give me something. I'm kidding. 10-10. Perfectly legitimate answer. Matt, what do you think? Better, worse, or the same?
I think worse.
Okay.
And that's just because of the level of competition. I was thinking the other day, and I was like, I'd be fine if we get 7 wins in conference, right? Like if we're 7-13, I still think we make the NCAA tournament with a losing record because those 7 wins are going to be against top 25 opponents, all of them. And all of our losses are going to be quality losses. And they're just going to be like, well, because 7-13 wins this conference, the winner's going to have like 13 wins, right?
Yep.
And so 7th is going to put you like kind of towards the bottom, but like not like in the middle, sort of. So like weirdly enough, like I'd be fine with 7 wins. I'd be mad, but like if we make a tournament, I'd feel like we're fine. I think honestly we're gonna end up with 8 or 9, and we're just gonna be slightly under 500, which is gonna piss so many people off. But that's fine to me because the conference this year is so deep and so crazy that you're gonna have probably 4 or 5 Big Ten teams in the Sweet 16, and just the way it's going to be spreading out. I think bracketology today, which is a little too early to look at, had all the Big Ten teams as 2 seeds. They swept the 2 seeds. I think in Joe Lenardi's bracketology. You can talk about Joe Lenardi, whether he's a good bracketologist or not, but they swept the 2 seeds. Like that's how crazy deep this conference is. We have 4 2 seeds in the conference, and then we had I think 2, 3, and 4 seeds. So there's 6 teams in the top 12 teams in the country. So that's absurd.
Yeah, Matt, I know you've got to skip out with a tight schedule. You're a popular person. Do you have any final thoughts here on this night before Jevan and I take the listeners home?
Yeah, I know it was a disappointing bowl win. By the way, thank you guys for having me on for however long I've been here. But I know it was a disappointing bowl game, but like don't let the one game disappoint you going into next year. And then also like the basketball team, like I get it, they're not playing well. But I at some point, everything has to be equal. So even when they're playing bad, at some point they're going to be playing well and they're going to be beating teams. And you guys are going to talk about it in a minute. I know for basketball, but we're going to play Wisconsin, and we haven't beaten Wisconsin in forever. So law of averages in this crazy year, this has to be the year, right? So I'm predicting us to win in Wisconsin in the most ridiculous game. Also, one final note is I will not be watching the game because I didn't watch the last 2 games live, and we won both of them. So I'm going to continue this streak for the sake of Hoosier fans all across the nation, and I will not be watching the next game live.
All right. On that note, we'll say goodbye to Matt. But Jevan and I will take you down the stretch here with episode 176 of the Hoosier Sound. Hey, Jevan, I'm going to be positive. I think Indiana's going to do better than 10-10. Look, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing Trace Jackson Davis right now as the second best player in this conference, maybe third after Ron Harper Jr. at Rutgers, maybe fourth after Io DeSumo at Illinois. I think with Trace Jackson Davis playing 35-plus minutes a game, Indiana's got a shot every time they step out on that court. And while your points are right as far as Indiana's got a tough schedule and the league is difficult, I don't really see an elite team in this conference. I think when you go play Iowa or when you go play Michigan or when you go play Wisconsin, like Indiana's going to do in a couple nights here, you're able to beat them. They are teams that you can knock off. In fact, right now, Ken Palm's got Indiana losing that Wisconsin game by 6 points. If that holds form, I mean, it's going to be a close game down the stretch. You never know what's going to happen. And I'll tell you this much, too. If Parker Stewart suits up for this team, I think he's going to pack and play 35 minutes for IU. But if he suits up for the Hoosiers and he's able to play 10, 15 minutes a night in February and March and knock down a couple threes and even stretch the defense, I think that's going to really help this team. But even if he doesn't play, I think Indiana's going to do better than that 10-10. Michigan State's not as good as people think they are. I think Rutgers is going to slump a little bit. I think Northwestern's falling back to earth, and you do have this Nebraska game coming up. I think Indiana's going to do a little better than that 10-10 mark. We'll see how it goes. We sent out a poll over on the Twitter machine, and right now it seems like fans are a little bit unsure. It's incredible. 33% of you said better than 10-10. 31% said worse, and 36% said it's going to be the same. So people are spread out. People aren't sure. We're definitely going to see how this all plays out. You can vote in that poll, by the way, up until Thursday night's tip when IU takes on Wisconsin. So I
have a question for you real quick.
Oh, ready.
So with Parker Stewart, how do you think that we need him. We need to be able to extend the floor. We need to be able to spread get Trace more room inside by bringing more outside shooters in. How do you think that he fits to Indy? Like, do you think he comes in and maybe like screws a little bit of whatever cohesion we have on offense up, or do you think that he fits right in and we just keep moving?
I think he'll mesh right in nicely. I don't see much of an adjustment going on there because Stewart himself has been able to play different roles in his career. He's been the ball dominant guy at UT Martin. He's been able to come off the bench at Pitt. I think whatever Archie Miller wants him to do, he'll be able to do. And so I see him merging in pretty easily to what this team wants. And there's playing time available. Let's be
Yeah,
frank.
absolutely. Especially with Armand going down. With Armand going down, that just opens up even more. So I agree with you totally.
And that's the thing. I don't know exactly what the situation with Christian Lander is right now, but he's supposed to get 5 minutes in a game. So clearly Archie Miller is not all that comfortable giving Lander a lot of playing time. And by no means do we expect Rob Finney and Al Durham to all of a sudden look like first-team all-conference players. So as I look at it, Parker Stewart, whatever is asked of him, he'll be able to adjust pretty quickly. Worst case scenario, comes in, misses a few shots, and well, that's par for the course for this team for the most part. So it's not like the end of the world. But anyway, let's transition here to look forward. Indiana's got 2 games coming up. The first one is the road matchup at top 10 Wisconsin. The Badgers are number 8 in the country, who fell 2 spots after a loss to Maryland last Monday night, but they bounced back with a blowout win over Minnesota. The Hoosiers are 2-2 in the conference. The Badgers are 3-1. It's going to tip 7:00 Eastern time Thursday night on Fox Sports 1. KenPom has Wisconsin winning 67-61, like we mentioned earlier. The Badgers won both games against the Hoosiers last season. They were 22nd in KenPom last year. They're up to 4th in the country per the KenPom ratings now. The Hoosiers are looking for their first win in Madison since January 25th, 1998. So, Jevan, I'm not even sure. I was going to ask, I'm not even sure if you were born then.
No.
The Hoosiers have lost 21 out of their last 24 against the Badgers. What do you know about Wisconsin, Jevan, and what should listeners watch for as the Hoosiers try to break this ugly drought against the Badgers?
Yeah, well, something that's been a constant with Wisconsin going back to the days when Frank Kaminsky was there. I mean, they play super, super slow. Their transition offense is not lackluster. It's just not really there whatsoever. Everything's more half-court set. And that's something that IU really thrives on. They create turnovers, and they themselves like to run in transition offense. But to my point earlier, with Indiana's transition defense not being where it needs to be, that's a positive with Wisconsin playing so slow. So that's something to look forward. I mean, if Wisconsin creates any up-tempo offense, I mean, Indiana's probably in a little bit of trouble. And if Indiana goes over 9 from 3 at the beginning in the first half, they're definitely in some trouble.
Yeah, I don't expect Indiana to miss all their 3-point shots in the first half on Thursday night. Next to-do list item is start better than 19-4. Which is how Wisconsin led after the first few minutes in Madison last season. As long as the Hoosiers do better than that, it'll already be an improvement. In case you guys don't know, the Badgers have started the same 5 guys all season. So Dimitri Trice, Ford, Reavers, and Mike Potter are the starting 5. They all average 10 points a game. They're balanced, although Trice has turned it up in Big Ten play. He's averaging 18-plus points per game in conference play in the 4 games the Badgers have played. Also of note, the Badgers haven't played since last Thursday night. So they're going to have a full week off. They had their game canceled against Penn State over the weekend due to COVID-19. I shouldn't say canceled. I guess it could be rescheduled at a later date. We'll see. Time will tell. What that means is it's a 3rd straight home game for Wisconsin. So it's a quirky little situation there in Big Ten play. All in all, like you said, Wisconsin plays really slowly. Interesting. They don't force that many turnovers. They don't really get their hands in the passing lanes too much. They really just focus on their fundamentals, being in the right place. So Indiana's got to protect the ball if they want to win. Obviously, they have players who can take good shots and make them. So that's really what it looks like on the surface in this matchup.
How scary is it knowing you're walking into Wisconsin and every one of the starting 5 can put up double digits? You don't get that with every team in the country. Like, there's any given player of those starting 5s can walk in and just take over an entire game. That's kind of scary.
No, it absolutely is, especially considering these are 5 guys who all have that Big Ten pedigree, right? It's not like any of these guys are transfers or they're new additions to this team. One guy I do want to mention as a new addition is Jonathan Davis, a freshman guard who's athletic. He's really splashed for the Badgers early on. He's one of their 8-man rotation, one of their 3 guys off the bench. But these guys have played together for so long. There's a graphic that's gone viral on social media as far as how old Wisconsin is. I think their starting 5 is older than the Chicago Bulls starting 5. which goes to show how much experience they have. And they've all done it at Wisconsin for the most part. I know Potter was a transfer from Ohio State, but he played last season with the Badgers. So that's what stands out to me. I'm going to ask you for a prediction, Jevan. Look, Ken Pom is saying Wisconsin by 6. How do you see this game playing out? Who's going to win, and give me a final score?
I would love to see Indiana walk in and get that long-awaited win in Wisconsin that they've been looking for. I don't think it happens. Don't think it happens this year. Maybe next year if we go to Wisconsin again. But I think the final score, I think it'll be close to 67-61. Maybe not even that high scoring considering how slow Wisconsin plays and how poorly Indiana shoots the ball sometimes. I'll say 54-60, Wisconsin.
Yeah. There you go. So the Badgers take it by 6 in a low-scoring game. I'm going to say Indiana pulls it off.
I like to hear it. I do.
Pull it off.
I like to hear it.
Look, as I said earlier, I feel like Indiana's going to do better than 10-10 in the Big Ten, and a win in this type of game could get it done. I saw Maryland go into the Kohl Center last Monday and beat Wisconsin pretty handily. And I understand Maryland had Daryl Morcell in that game, and they didn't have him for the Hoosiers matchup, but this Wisconsin team, I think, is overachieving just a little bit. I don't think they're the 8th best team in the country. I don't think they're the hands-down best team in the Big Ten. I can see Wisconsin taking Indiana a little bit as well. If Indiana keeps it close and keeps it interesting, that could add some pressure on the Badgers. Well, I think Indiana's got a little less stress going into this game. No one's expecting them to win, except me, I guess. So I think the Hoosiers are going to pull this off. Again, low scoring. I think Indiana's going to win at 64-62. A nail-biter of a game. I think you're going to see Rob Finney defend Dimitri Trice. I think that inside battle with Trace Jackson-Davis and Race Thompson against Reavers and Potter will be a fun one to watch. And I think Indiana got a little bit tougher over the last week. I think if you played this game 2 weeks ago, or maybe if you even played this 2 weeks from now, it might be a different story. I think Indiana got tougher. That win over Penn State was big. Coming back the way they did against Maryland was big. Of course, I could look like I got my face in about 72 hours, but we'll see how that goes. There's a second game this week. Yeah. Indiana heads to Lincoln, Nebraska to take on the bottom of the barrel basement feeding Nebraska Cornhuskers on Sunday night. It's a 6 Eastern tip. It's a true road game, and road games in the Big Ten are never easy. Ken Pom likes Indiana to beat Nebraska 73-65. Nebraska will also have a full week off after tonight's game at Purdue was postponed. Nebraska last played on Saturday night against Michigan State, losing a close one. They played well against the Spartans. They chewed out they came from behind, trimming a deficit in the second half and made it interesting down the stretch. Nebraska takes a ton of threes. Teddy Allen is their leading guy. It's pretty much sort of a one-man band. They've got some other pieces that contribute, but really it's Teddy Allen's show. Jevan, Indiana's not losing to Nebraska, right? No way that happens.
I sure hope not. I'm looking at this game, and with the unfortunate injury of Armand Franklin, and in the game against Maryland, just under 10 minutes left in the first half, I'm looking at not so much the Wisconsin game, but the Nebraska game as a game that maybe Christian Lander finally gets going. Because, I mean, last time I was on here, I spoke very highly of Christian Lander, and I still do. I just think he needs that one game where he, doesn't have 30, of course, but like has a game where he goes out and shoots maybe like 4 for 5 and has himself a very consistent game and shoots the ball well, or just gets more than 5 minutes and has a spurt where he plays well. I think foul trouble has kind of mitigated his time the last couple games that he's been in, but I sure hope that we beat Nebraska. Let's just keep it at that.
Yeah, in case you guys may not be aware, Nebraska is last in the Big Ten. They still have yet to win a conference game. Ken Pom has them in the 110s. I think there's something like 114th in the country right now, significantly lower than every other Big Ten team. So if Indiana loses this game, the alarm signals will be out.
The Archie Miller haters will be very potent that night. They'll be everywhere.
Without a question, it's going to be ugly. I think it's going to be a trap game. I called the Indiana game a bit of a trap game for Wisconsin. I think Nebraska game is going to be a trap game for Indiana. I mean, this is a team with Teddy Allen who's gone out average 18 points per game this year. He's a JUCO transfer, but he used to play at West Virginia and transferred to Wichita State before taking the JUCO route. Trey McGowan's is a solid player. Delano Benton has given teams problems. He's just sort of this really long, athletic point guard type player, not really with major NBA potential, but it's an unusual type of matchup.
Yeah.
I think Indiana is going to have a double-digit first-half deficit in this game, and they're going to have to wake up at halftime like they did against Maryland. And I think if they do that, you'll be able to come back and beat Nebraska. I've got the Hoosiers winning this one in a close one, a one-score ball game. I expect there to be more points. I'm expecting like a 75-72 IU win, but it's going to be stressful. It's going to be wild. It's going to be a roller coaster. We're going to get a full evening of Torbjarnarson on Sunday night.
So you had both games at a one-score game.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, does Rob Finney get another game winner in any of those games?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be Trace Jackson Davis down the stretch. I think you're going to see more Jerome Hunter. I think, maybe Al Durham will hit one of those. Durham's been a key part of IU's offense here in the last couple of games, so I can see him hitting a big shot as well. Rob Finney knows how to do it, no question. Yeah. If he hits one or two of those, the legend will just grow as far as Finney and clutch situations and clutch shots. So as we wind down here, Jevan, any final thoughts here? We talked about the Outback Bowl. We talked about Indiana's going 2-0 this past week. They've got a tough matchup on Thursday night against Wisconsin. Nebraska to follow. What do you want to say here as we wind down tonight?
Just one thing that I had on my mind is I've always been a believer in like taking a bye week is not always in their best interest, and I believe that in football. I believe that in basketball. And I think you'll see that coming up in the NFL playoffs with teams winning bye weeks. So when you look at both Wisconsin and Nebraska taking almost a week or maybe even longer in some cases before they play IU, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I think it's good to be playing consistently so you can stay hot or getting minutes to players that aren't playing too well in order to get them going. So I think that plays into Indiana's favor more than it plays into Wisconsin or Nebraska's.
Yeah, and for me, Jevan, I can't stress this enough. Do not take Trace Jackson Davis for granted. If you're an Indiana Hoosiers basketball fan, Trace, this guy, obviously Indiana kid, Center Grove High School, he's already averaging 20 points per game this season. If you go back and look, only 4 others other than Jackson Davis have gone out and averaged 20 points a game in an IU uniform. Yogi Ferrell didn't do it. Victor Oladipo didn't do it. It's guys like Brian Evans and Calbert Chaney, longtime Hoosier fans who've gone down in the history books, people that are synonymous with Indiana Hoosier legends. So as far as I'm concerned, don't take this guy lightly. It's probably going to be his last season in Indiana uniform. When he is on, when his motor is firing at full speed, when he's feeling himself, when he's feeling good about his matchup, he's capable of single-handedly dominating a basketball game. And here's the great part. As we saw on Monday night, even when he's off, he's able to flip that switch and take over a game. He doesn't solve, doesn't power, he doesn't line when things aren't going his way. He just sticks with it, keeps fighting through it, keeps powering through it. And what do we see? Even though Armand Franklin went down, he was able to turn Indiana's fortunes and get that.
I mean, even himself, he had a little knee injury. And when I tell you that everyone took a deep breath when that happened, oh my goodness. It was like you could hear everybody just do one of those real quick because, he grabbed his knee, went up, grabbed his knee again, like in yelling and pain. And then all of a sudden hits his free throw, runs down the court and starts jumping as if everything's fine. So that was very that was a good sight to see, especially after the Armand injury. But hey, shout out Brian Evans, alma mater, went to my high school.
There you go. Who would have thought? I didn't even plan that. And when the guys on the bench see their best player, see their team leader show that sort of toughness, well, it's going to translate to the rest of the team. It's going to transfer to all of them, which can only be good for this IU basketball team. But that about wraps it up for our 176th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You guys are all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can go to our website, indianahq.com, find everything in one place. Lastly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation.